It was just so surreal to know that he had passed. And I guess it's because he just was such a vibrant guy, just such a nice guy, such a kind, sweet, but damn good photographer. But always was just, a super nice person. So when you were writing the obituary, it just didn't feel real. It was hard to believe because he did have such a great career. He was amazing as a photographer, but he was also amazing as a human being.
And if he's in heaven, what's he up there doing?
Well, we know he's in heaven for sure, but I'm guessing that Ken is probably setting up some really great shots of some really great things. And he's taking his time, as he always did, to set it and get a great shot and make everybody look good, because that's what he did.
Is he working with the angels?
Ken is probably working with the angels right now, setting up some incredible shots and doing incredible things, because that's what he did down here. Damn good photographer.
Is he one of the best shooters out there?
Oh my gosh. Well, besides Mike Lowry, Ken Day was an amazing photographer. He was so good. You just always felt like you were in good hands when you worked with Ken. And when we went to Romania, it was wonderful because being with him, you just knew that we were going to come back with a great product.
Would he be getting a round of applause right now for all his work here on Earth?
He would absolutely be getting a round of applause, but I don't know that he would want that round of applause. I think he would probably just kind of go like, "Oh my gosh, please." He was so humble and yet so good at what he did and made everyone feel good to work with him.
Our wonderful, wonderful friend who passed too early. Tell me your thoughts about who this man is and what your thoughts are.
Well, I had to think about this a little bit, but this, there's a lot to say about Ken. I'll just say this, that, I came to Sacramento in 1995, got hired at KOVR, and that's where Ken was at the time. And, it was a real honor to get hired there because there's a very talented photo staff. And Ken was a big part of that. And the thing I remember about Ken is that he was just always really warm. He gave you, I'd look at his work, I go, gosh, Ken, that's terrific. How'd you do that, or this or that? And he was always great at imparting his experience to you and giving you pointers about maybe shoot it this way or that way. And just a really humble, nice fellow. Never had a harsh word to say anything. And that says something in the news business where, the stresses of just getting stuff on the air every day is can take a toll on you. And sometimes people are not so nice. But that was not the case with Ken. Just a terrific guy.
You took the time out of a Saturday to come and do this. Why?
Well, just as I say, Ken meant a lot to me. I always counted him as a good friend, a professional colleague. We kind of would run into each other out in the field when he left working in television news, and it just always brought a smile to my face. 'Cause I said, "Oh, there's Ken. Here we are on the big story, and there's Ken shooting for the network or whoever." But always took time out just to give you a little hug, a little handshake. How you doing? How's the family? Right back and forth. So, for me, when I just feel like we lost a really good one. We really did. You don't find very many people with a combination of extremely talented at what he does, dedicated to what he did, and then not only just being a great person. And that, the whole package. You can't find many people like that end up surviving in the business for as long as he had.
Oh, hi, I'm Stan Peckner. That's Stanpechner.
Now, you were telling me about when you would see these two guys. Tell me about that. Great photos.
One of my favorite experiences working with ESPN is every year during the finals, I would get to see not only John Pavlovich, but Ken Day. And the three of us together would reconnect, tell stories, make fun of a few people, and reminisce about the old days.
And when you say make fun of a few people, I know it was in good heart, good nature, good humor. Can you tell me a funny story? I mean, what was it giddy? Was it, or girls just giddy?
It wasn't giddy, but I can't tell the stories because I'm afraid of incriminating some people.
They were that good.
It was just like, it was more like remembering the old times, or not the old times, remembering the good times, the good old days when TV was fun. I think during the '90s, it was a really great experience to be around this group of photographers that I looked up to, because I was still wet behind the ears when I got to KOVR in the early '90s, and I only had about 3 years of television experience behind me, and here I had Ken Day and John Pavlovich and Dennis Marin and Ken Zukin, all of these photographers that I looked up to, and just talking about those days and the things that we were able to do back then that nobody does anymore, even at a network level, because of money. And back then, it wasn't unusual to come in the morning and see a photographer packing up their gear and saying they have to go catch a flight. I mean, that was fun.
When you would see Ken Day, did you know that you were working with a pro?
Ken Day was an incredible photographer. And when I hate you, Joyce. Okay. There are no.
Is this hard for you?
It's hard because there's so many stories and so many instances being around these photographers that all I wanted to do was to be like them. I wanted to be around them. I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to shoot like them. I wanted to tell stories like them. And somebody like Ken Day, to see the images that he would make and the stories he got to tell, all I wanted to do was just be like him. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be like John Pavlovich. I wanted to be like Dennis Marin, because not being as experienced as they were and being a young camera guy coming up, I always looked up to these guys. And Ken Day was one of those people I looked up to.
When you heard he was sick, and then when you heard he died, he lost his battle with cancer. What went through you?
I knew Ken had been sick for a while, and I think one of the biggest regrets I have about his passing is not reaching out enough just to check in and to see how he was doing. And that for me is like been really hard. And when he passed, it's like there was a sense of relief, but also regret. And I just I couldn't believe he was gone.
It's like this Ken Day is supposed to always be here. I mean, it's like he's not supposed to go anywhere. Ken Day is everywhere and with us, and it's just hard to fathom, and it's a difficult thing to register that he's not here. And where do you put that?
You know, as I get older and mortality becomes a part of your as I become older, one begins to think more about their mortality than they might when they're younger. And I had the great opportunity in my later career to see Ken Day often, which was great. And to have photographers or friends of mine that are younger passing away, it's gives you pause to think about, you know, your own life. And
The 30 years I worked with Ken, I never told him I loved him. It's take him, it's like Ken, it's Ken, it's like. So this is, I know it's kind of maybe a tough guy question. Is love involved with someone like Ken Day? Did you love Ken Day?
of course, I love Ken Day. Who would not? Who wouldn't even? There's a lot of people who I have there's a lot of people that I have contact with, who I work with and I see, and it's not uncommon to give a big bro hug or to tell someone that you love them. I never got the opportunity to tell Ken Day how I really felt about him. I never thought that the last time I saw him would be the last time I saw him. And that was tough.
You can tell him right now.
Yeah, Ken Day was a great guy, and I love that man to death. And so much respect for him too. So much respect.
Good stuff, dude.
Okay.
Man, I came to work at KOVR in about 1984. So that's how long I'd known Ken, since 1984. And when I first showed up, I knew nothing about news. I knew that there was a good photo staff, and I just tried to mold myself after that photo staff. And one of the people in that photo staff was Ken Day. The guy had a work ethic that just wouldn't stop. And that's what I tried to get from him. I tried to mold my career after his work ethic. He was out before sunrise getting shots. He was getting sunset shots. And these were for pieces that he knew were going to be good. And he went the extra step and put in the extra effort to make those pieces good. And that's what I wanted to do. And I worked to try to make those guys proud. I worked to try to make Ken Day notice my work. And I hope somewhere along the way he noticed. And I'm just like everybody else. I'm gonna miss him. I miss him. I will always miss him.
When you heard he died, what went through you?
It was a shock. It was a shock. I don't keep in touch with people as much as I should. I talk to Ken every once in a while. I always wanted to call and see how he was doing, but I never knew if it was the right thing to do, and I don't like the fact that I didn't keep in touch with him as much as I should have, just to check on him. I knew he was at Stanford. I knew that he had a process that wasn't going all that well. When I was told that he was going to be coming home, but it wasn't looking good, it was like, okay. But then when I got the message saying that he was on his way home and didn't make it, it was tough. It was hard because you don't like losing a friend.
When we did those two music videos together, Ken loved working with you. He goes, Lowry, yay, yeehaw, let's go. I mean, there was that kind of mutual respect, enthusiasm, and I think you both had it for one another. And you both have different styles, and both great.
Yeah.
Both great. And you loved it, and you brought it together. Was that fun working with him on those music videos?
It was a treat to be able to do that, because when Ken left KOVR, it was always, I would go to the Capitol and he would be there with his cart full of gear heading in to go do something. It was those little times that I was able to catch up with him. It'd be 4 or 5 minutes worth of a conversation just to see how he's doing and what was going on. So to be able to actually work on a project with Ken was an absolute treat. Absolute. I felt so inferior to him because he had been working on these big shoots for so much longer. I had just left news. So to be able to work on a shoot like this with Ken was a pleasure and a treat for me.
How about when he set up that whole dolly? I mean, what
The
was that about?
The equipment that he had, I loved the lenses that he had. I loved the gear that he had. And again, coming from news where you just worked with what you had, and it may have been 25 years old, the light stands are barely holding together. And then you go out and you see Ken and all his gear. It's like, wow, that's what I want to do.
And he really, really did a good job with it. And you two together, I mean, the way that you played off of each other. I mean, there was a special connection, even though you say that you didn't reach out. There's kind of a forever that you have built, don't you
Yeah,
think?
I think so. I would hope that he knew that he was being thought about, prayed for by a lot of people who were on his side and fighting with him. We were all one of those people. Going back to working with him, the music videos that we shot, once they were all done and edited and put together, I would let you see them. Send them to Ken so he could see and get his final touches on the whole thing. And to Ken's humor, which was always there, and I got the message still on my phone. It's like, I really like the piece. I like how it flowed. I think maybe you should change like the first shot, add a little bit more, and maybe about 30 seconds in, if we can add some trombone and some tambourine, and then maybe if you got a shot of some clapping monkeys, we can put that in there. So you never knew where it stood in. By the end, it was like, well, was I supposed to change that first shot? At what point did the joking start? So that was just his humor. He had a great sense of humor. And you never saw him get mad. My impression of Ken Day getting mad is, gosh darn it. That was what he say. Gosh darn it. So
You're good. That's it from you. It's the best. You gotta use, that is so Ken Day. You see, I didn't talk about, it didn't hit me about how dopey he was. I mean, because that's not really appropriate. But when he was dying and I talked to him the day before, I said, you know, you're really dopey. And he smiled. I mean, it's just like, it was no secret. I used to say, "You are so dopey," you know, and we would laugh because we would just go back and forth on things like you would not believe that were so ridiculous. And so the tambourine, the monkey stuff,
Yeah.
you got to use that. That is in Ken Day all the way. That is so Ken Day.
Let me hit on the hummingbird, because I'm going to do a little bit of hummingbird stuff in there.
Yeah.
You had told me that he wanted to come back as a hummingbird, and you had painted a picture of a hummingbird. So I knew the whole backstory to the hummingbird. Yesterday, before I had to come down here, Toby talked about the hummingbird. Yesterday, knowing that we were going to be doing these interviews today, a hummingbird, as I was sitting out in the backyard, a hummingbird flew up on a line and just sat there and looked at me. And all I could do was to look at the hummingbird and tell the hummingbird, I'm going to do my best for you tomorrow, Ken. I thought I'd be able to get through that story, but I didn't. So it's time for him to fly. So
Let there be love.
What's there to be said? I'm not gonna say anything new that no one else has talked about. Ken was a great friend. He was a great mentor. He was a great colleague, great dad, grandfather, husband, family guy, a stellar all-around kind of guy. He was a ultimate diamond geezer.
When we went out shooting with him, running around Sacramento in the heat,
Yeah.
Ken was sick, and you and I are nearly passing out. How was he to keep up with?
Yeah, he's very difficult. I mean, we were there to kind of look out for him. And to be honest with you, I just ran out of fuel. He was running around. We were carrying gear. It was difficult shoot. It was a demonstration, as I recall. And he kept going. I had to ask him for a little break, I said, hey, Ken, I really need to stop and sit down. And didn't want him to be concerned, but of course he always was about everyone he worked with. So, yeah, he was just very tough to keep up with.
Then you were shooting the detransitioners,
Mm-hmm.
and the camera got whacked. What was that like with him? I mean, is he holding his own? Does he panic? What did Ken do when his camera what happened?
That was a very harrowing time. We were there to shoot. It was a transgender documentary. I think Antifa was out there in support of transgender rights, but of course they didn't know Ken was shooting a story in support of transgender rights. He tried explaining it to them, but of course they didn't want to hear about it. They were shoving umbrellas in his camera and sticks. And eventually, one of them, I was behind Ken, one of them pushed me out the way. And as I turned around to look back, I saw the guy up in the air with like a 2-foot, 3-foot pipe in his hand. And I really thought we were going to lose Ken because he was aiming for his head. And if the camera hadn't been on Ken's right shoulder, that's what the guy struck. He struck his camera, $25,000 camera, smashed. The shoot, I thought, was going to stop then, but of course, Ken said, "You've got your phone, I've got my phone, we're shooting this." So we started shooting with our phones the rest of the time. Police were interested. They took a report. They actually arrested the person who had struck Ken, and he didn't want to press charges. And Ken just refused to press charges against the person. Yeah. He was a very forgiving guy. He always saw both points of a story, and he had empathy and sympathy at the same time, you know, for both sides. He was there to record what was happening. He was there to tell a story, and he didn't want to make it about him. He always wanted it to be about the story, about the people and the stories that he was covering. So I learned a lot from Ken.
Did you love Ken?
Like a brother. Ken, I mean, you know, people say brother from another mother, you know. I'm from Iran. I always called Ken a Persian version. He was a neighbor. We hung out almost every Sunday morning. He wanted to. My favorite drink was coffee. His favorite drink was Jamba Juice. He even said, "Hey, you know, we'll go have coffee." I said, "No, let's go have Jamba Juice together." So that's what we did every Sunday morning. Most Sunday mornings, if he didn't have a family plan or a job that day, we would hang out. I miss him dearly.
I stepped on that. Could you say
Yeah.
that again? You miss him dearly.
I miss Ken dearly.
Did you ever hear anything about hummingbirds in Ken Day?
If I remember correctly, he said that he would be back as a hummingbird. That's what he believed. That's what he told me. That's what he told other friends. I always smiled when I heard it. The hummingbirds always mesmerized him. He would watch them. He would stay still and watch them in his yard. So, you know, since he's been gone, I've seen one hummingbird out on a shoot, and I basically forgot what was going on. I just followed that hummingbird. I wasn't looking at my camera anymore. I was following the hummingbird to see what it was doing, and just remembering my times with Ken while I was doing that.
Oh boy, okay. I always loved working with Ken. He was a great cameraman, so much fun. But the thing I remember the most and really appreciated was the day that Ken called me up. It was during the time about 2 years ago when there were a lot of killings of young black people around the country by policemen and other races. And for over an hour, we talked, and he wanted to share his grief and disappointment and embarrassment and frustration about the whole matter. At that particular time, I knew Kenny was truly a soul brother. I will never forget him.
I'm done. I'm
Just
done.
ask you like if you miss them or because
Okay.
we're gonna have like a block, and then if we can get like snippets in.
But
from
you know
people.
what we also have is some of the footage from times like these video when we were downtown shooting that march and all of that stuff. It was, we could use some of that with what he said. Now tell me, when you're.
When I
this
worked
is-
with him,
No, I'm gonna ask you something else. When he died, what went through you?
well, when Ken died, I just knew that just couldn't be true. I mean, Ken Day, come on, he's an evergreen. It really broke my heart. That's all I could say about that. I just couldn't believe it. I had to call my friend Joyce. I had to call around, and I had to go through a little bit of therapy with my friends to discuss how wonderful he was.
Would heaven be clapping to receive Ken Day?
Oh my God. The angels were just throwing their rings around and saying, "We got another one. We got a good guy up here."
That Kenny Day had a little playful side in him, that he was kind of a kook once in a while?
Oh yeah, I mean, all the time. He and I would have conversations about the business, and we would just laugh in hysterics about because he'd say, "Oh yeah, I got these producers in L.A. calling me up, and they want me to go up to Humboldt County, and can you be there in an hour?" And he would explain to them, and he goes, "They just don't understand." So we would laugh about stuff like that all the time. And Kenny eventually moved into my neighborhood. We only lived about an eighth of a mile away from each other, so we'd see each other all the time. I'd see him at the grocery store. I'd see him at the park walking his dogs. I'd go over every once in a while when he had just purchased a drone, and he would go over to Maidu Park and fly the drone, and I would meet him over there and watch and everything. And that's when we laughed a lot, because him trying to learn the drone.
He learned it though.
He did.
Everybody who knows Ken, and I traveled with him, we'd be out of town, and the one favorite place he liked to go to eat, his favorite grocery store, do you have any idea what that is?
Well, I always saw him at Safeway, so that's where I saw him, and that's where we both shopped. So yeah.
He loved that place.
Yeah.
Ken, where are we going to go eat out of town?
Safeway. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
he loved that place, the people, everything, right? There was a kindred spirit with them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And we'd run into each other at Safeway, and we're sitting there talking for a half hour, and we look down in the cart and the ice cream's melting. So yeah, stuff like that all the time. But Kenny was a unique person, because he had a serious side, but he had a funny, jokey side that would come out every once in a while. But when it came to work, he was really a go-getter, and sometimes I think he worried too much about this and that, and equipment, but I remember when I came on board at KLBR, he was already there. He had just come down from Boise, and I came up from Fresno, so we were kind of the newbies. And so we kind of clicked, and we had a good staff. We had a really good staff of photographers, and we all had our own styles. But Kenny had an eye. I called it the golden eye, because he just picked up other stuff that others might miss. I mean, one of the tricks to photography is, you capture what the lens can't see, and he always did a good job of that. So, and then, he eventually left KLVR and went out on his own, and started working freelancing, and that's when he really took off on a national basis. And I missed him, but luckily I was close enough to see him in the neighborhood. So yeah, I miss him a lot. He was a good guy, good family guy, good dad, good husband.
Few people can really relate to what you mentioned you wanted to say about what happens in a situation like this.
Yeah.
To a mate, to a partner.
I lost my wife, Susie, in 2015 to brain cancer. And Kenny was there. He would make trips over and, help me out with certain things. And then as, you'd have to live with the grief for, a year or two, but you're told you got to move on, because life doesn't stop. The person that is gone, but you've still got the memory of that person. And then from there on, things just went like a snowball down the hill. I mean, John Pavlovich passed away, John Iender passed away, Manuel Diaz passed away, Shockey Moore passed away. I mean, that was 3/4 of our photo staff. They're gone. And then Kenny. And it's just, but you can't look at it as grief for too long. You just have to think that, he and everybody else is up there in heaven just having a wild time, telling stories and looking down at us and going, yep, they'll be here someday, and we will. It's like there's an old proverb called the train that I read at my wife's service, and it's everybody when they're born, they get on this train with their parents, and you just clickety clack down the tracks, but the train makes stops, and people get on, but people get off, and you just are riding the train until you reach that final station where it's your turn to get off. And it was Kenny's time. I mean, he was fighting a brutal battle, and nobody should have to go through that. But I remember he called me from the hospital at Stanford, asking me, he goes, hey, this reporter used to work at your station, and I just saw him on CBS, and he's terrible. And I go, and I didn't even have to ask him who it was. I knew, and I go, yeah, he's kind of a different kind of guy. So I mean, even up to that point, he was always involved in watching the news, watching the business, and everything. So, yeah, it's terrible that he's gone, but I know his family misses him, and Vicky probably wondering what to do next. And I go, Vicky, it'll all happen. It just has to all fall in place, and down the road, it'll all work out for you. And I go, I know that they had the family cabin up at Serene Lakes, up near Soda Springs, and they were a family that just thrived together. And Kenny had his dogs and loved his dogs, and yeah. And the last story I'll tell you is, and it's ironic, that Kenny for a time he stopped shooting because of the treatments he was going through. But then he started up again, and he ran into a crew down in Southern California, and the photog saw him and came over to Ken and goes, "What are you doing here? I thought you were dead." And he told me that story, and we just laughed. We laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, because he made light of it, and it was, but at that time he was feeling pretty good from his transfusions and his treatments and everything. But yeah, for him to say that, and then boom, it happened eventually, which it's just trying to fight those battles with all the medications and treatments and everything. It just overtakes you, and
And we're all faced with the cycle of the circle of life.
right, that's it. That's what it boils down to. The circle of life. Like, I think the day you're put here on earth, you have your birth date, but your death date has already been determined as well. And you have all these paths that you have to choose, and you go this way or that way or what, and how it leads to, what you end up with. And, Kenny made a trip down the right path because he got a great family and was a great photographer and earned a lot of respect and awards. And yeah, I miss him. I miss him on a daily basis because I don't see him at Safeway anymore, So, yeah.
Did I leave anything out, Lowry?
I don't think so. How long did you know? Did you talk about that? How long did you know?
Well, Kenny started in '82, late '82, and I started in mid '83. He came from Boise, I came from Fresno. And so yeah, all the way from 1983 until he passed. So yeah, a good 37, 40 years. But that's everybody. I mean, Mike behind the camera, same thing. Elbert. And we thrived as a photo department. And yeah, we had our issues with the station, with the company, and et cetera, but we all still thrived and, beat the competition on a regular basis. And a lot of that was Ken.
I was putting a lot of Facebook pictures up when Ken was sick. Fiorelli reached out to me. And he said, Joyce, in a private message, the best photo staff
Yeah.
anywhere in the country. And I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. You guys were great. You worked together. You had each other's back, and you made great pictures.
That staff could have been nationally awarded in National Press Photographers or NAB had we had the backing from the company, but we didn't. So it just kind of fell. But yeah, we had a really good staff, and I, retired now, and I miss those guys that have gone on, and I miss the guys that are still with us that I don't see anymore, like Mike Duncan, and I talk to Elbert every once in a while, but yeah, it's tough, but it's something that you have to battle through, and all of us are going to have to do it at one time or another, whether it be a family member like your wife or your husband or a uncle or a cousin. It's just, people come, like that train proverb, people come and go all the time. Clickety-clack down the tracks.
And then God awaits you.
Awaits you and has a plan for you. I believe it. I don't know what the plan is, but, and I think about that a lot. I go, what are we doing here on this tiny earth? I mean, who out of the big picture of things decided to take this little global and throw it out there and put life on it? And what are we all doing here? What is our purpose? Are we already in heaven? Have all of us already gone on and we just don't know it? I mean, you can get really lost in the ozone on stuff like that, but yeah, it's tough to think about.
In the long run, would you say it's about God and love?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You got to have the love for your fellow man and God, or else you just, why are you here?
Badass photographers around.
Very well put.
Tell me about Ken Day.
Oh my gosh. Well, when Ken Day came to KOVR, he was a youngster. You know what? He only had one car. They lived in Natomas. I remember him riding his bike every day from Natomas to the station, back again at night, raising all those kids. And I believe, and I don't know about the other photographers, because I was jealous of Kenny. I was jealous of Kenny because he had an eye that no one else had. He had the way he could frame pictures and come up with things that most people would just look at and just, but he had ways of putting forefronts and rear, all kinds of things. So I really caught my eye right away. I said, this is really different. Now, editing wise, perfectionist. And sometimes that got him in trouble because we had deadlines. And so he had, but I'm not ready. Those are back in the days we had to run the tape fast as we could to get it on the air. I'm sure things are different now. They don't even have tape. But no, Kenny was great, unbelievable family man. And that's the tough part of all this. I think he was probably, like I said, one of the most creative photographers. I put him and John Pavlovich neck and neck all the time because I could tell they're, how you look and you see people's style. Oh, I know who shot that. Every now and then I couldn't tell between those two. But it was fantastic person to work with, never got angry, always had a smile, at least he tried to in the midst of chaos. But he always persevered, and we did fantastic things together. I miss him. That was a tough one on us, Kenny and I, with Dennis Marin, cleaned out John Iyender's office. Vicky called us up and said, can you guys please help? Kenny and I were there, and for hours on to days, we were sitting there. So looking through things, and I never thought, you know, here we are again. You know, it's just sad losing these guys that way ahead of their time. Totally miss them.
Is there an emptiness in your heart?
Yeah. In fact, what's interesting is when you got a hold of me, I went back and started reading old texts from I'm like, oh my gosh, and it just to get a sense of connection back. You know, it's been a few months since he's passed. And one thing about Kenny is when I talk to him, I'm in San Francisco, but everything's going to be fine. And then he started asking, how are you doing? How are your daughters doing? I said, Kenny, I'm calling to find out about you and your family. Oh, they're fine. Everything's great. Never once did he ever say, you know, he's in pain or struggling or anything. Never once. So it was a shock.
Did you love the man?
Yeah, I might have even kissed him once or twice. But don't say that to anybody. Because you know he was gay. I don't know if you knew that. But I had to say, you know, you got a lovely wife. Come on now. So we had our moments. That shit's funny.
Figure out how to put that.
Oh, God.
Kende loved to laugh.
Love to laugh. He's laughing now. I can feel it. Kenny loved to laugh. Kenny Day. Yeah. It's a miss. We miss him.
But the heavens are cheering for him, right? He's up there and they're...
I'm sure he was welcomed by a lot of open arms of the wonderful people that went before him. And one day we'll be up there and they'll be welcoming us. But Kenny, yeah, he's up there right now trying to orchestrate the best shot to see, well, whatever he's doing it well. To perfection.
Just ask him about when he found out about him, when the shock, what went through.
When you
Hmm.
Ken had passed. What would happen?
When did I find out? I found out the day it happened. And through a series of whatever, it might have been the day after. And I sat down because it wasn't something of a surprise, but it was something of a sadness because he was going home. And that, I think, what got me more than anything. He just didn't make it back to the house because we were all excited of him being moved, you know. And then when I found out that it didn't make it, that was devastating. It wasn't that we didn't know he wasn't going to pass. It was the fact that he didn't get home before he passed. And then that was just hard to even capture. So yeah, that was a tough one.
And still, all these months later, we're all grieving. I mean, that's why we're here, is we want to give him a send-off. We want him to know, because I know he's listening and he's watching and he's supervising him, and he's afraid that he's going to fuck up the shot. So
Well,
he's got to make it perfection.
Exactly.
And Ken has shot right here in this position. So,
But you know what's interesting too? We all knew Ken. But I think this is going to be fabulous because his kids didn't really know how we knew Ken, how we felt about Ken. And the neat thing is now they're going to have something because they were little, tiny little guys and they're all doing their own thing as, you know, back in whenever the years were when we were. But they're going to see this. They're going to go, he had no idea. There's going to be so many things that they're not going to know about him, and they're going to learn just because of what you guys are doing here. And I think it's fantastic.
you mean like he was gay?
Like he was gay. Maybe we should cut that out because they may not want to know that. But I'm sure you guys will edit that out. Oops.
That's awesome.
Oh, good.
Okay, I'm good.
Oh, Ken was really special. And you always knew when he was your photographer that you were going to look great. And I'd look sometimes at the video and I'd think, is that me? Because he made me look fabulous. And he always took the time to make each story the best. Even if it was one of those, stupid feature stories that you'd get sent on, he still gave that the same attention that he would on a breaking important story. And always was so kind and just, he was the best.
In other words, you're saying he was pretty easy to work with.
Oh, he was so easy to work with. He saw the shots before, he knew what story you were going to do. And then he saw the shots before you would even say, okay, I'm going to need this, this, and this. He was very easy to work with.
And he gave you the sequences, right?
Yes. He just knew how to put the story together. And the shots were the best, the editing was the best. You knew that your story was going to be one of the best on air that night.
When you heard Ken had died, what went on?
It was horrible. He just went far too soon, and you knew that we lost one of the great ones. And it just, because he would always call me to, he would always call me to get-togethers with the photographers and other Channel 13 people. And I remember one of the last times I saw him was when he helped organize look at our blooper tape. And so he and some others came over to my house and we watched the blooper tape and from 13 and just had such a great time. It was really hard when I heard he had died.
Where do you put it now? It seems like it still evokes a lot of pain and a lot of emotion for you because, why?
Yeah. Well, because he was so special and such a huge part of my life in my career. And then afterwards because he always made sure we all got together. And then it was so much fun to reminisce and hear what he was doing and all of us were doing. And it was just, as I said, really special. And he had a great sense of humor. Great sense of humor. In fact, I always remember the story he told me when his kids were little. And at school, one of the kids had somebody come and talk about it was some kind of abuse, child abuse or something. And the child came home and Ken was maybe disciplined him in some way. And his son looked up to him and he says, "You better not be amusing me," and instead of abusing me, But so he had a great sense of humor and just an all-around wonderful guy.
It sounds like you got a big hole in your heart.
Yeah, I do, I do have a hole in my heart. Yeah. Sorry. Wow. Didn't realize that was going to happen. Yeah.
Okay.
I worked with Ken for about 25 years over at Channel 13.
Was he a star shooter?
He was an excellent shooter.
What would he, did he complain? Did he whine? What kind of a guy was Ken Day?
Ken Day was an excellent photojournalist, okay? He never did whine, he never complained, he just did his job.
And when he came back into the house and the job was done, what was the product like?
It was superb, superb. I don't know, that's the only way I can describe it, but it was superb.
Would you say Ken was a star?
Yes, yes, yes.
Can you tell me that?
Ken was a star. Everybody wanted to work with Ken. He has a positive attitude. He was just a great person.
And you were kind of his boss, so you oversaw
Right, right.
his work.
Yeah.
And did you ever have to slap him around at all?
No, no, not Ken. No, no.
And did he come to work with a smile or was he grumpy?
He came to work with a smile every day. He had a positive attitude.
And did Ken love his work?
Yes. Ken loved his work.
Did it show in his work? Did he?
Yes. Yeah. Ken loved his work, and it definitely showed in his. In
Let's start again. I think that is a really good thing. As his boss, you saw that Ken loved his work.
right. Ken loved his work, and
I need louder, Albert. A little bit louder.
yes, Ken loved his work. Okay, and it always showed up at the end of the day. Once he finished.
Start again.
Okay.
I know it's hard for you to be on the other side because this is your place over here. It's the same thing for me when I'm there. I stumble on it. It's not comfortable.
Okay.
But, Ken was your star. And
Ken was our star. He would go out and just give it his all, and it showed in his work at the end of the day.
And do it again only because I have a ping on my phone. That's my fault. But Ken was our star, and it showed in his work every day.
Right. Ken was a star, and it definitely showed in his work every day.
Beautiful.
I just think that Ken was such a decent, kind, loving person that I think I always had the sense that he was very much an underdog person. And, when you deal with people who do life-changing things like making a transition as a transgender person, I think that really spoke to him about somebody who had really suffered, not just in the moment, but for their whole lives. Because, people like me sometimes don't know who we are or what we are or why we are. And so I think that really got to him. I think he found it to be an important part of getting the story of people like me out there. I think it was something that became a passion project for him.
There's no question that he said it was the best interview ever, and he's worked everywhere. Was there a soul connection when you saw him, when he would come over and just shoot B-roll? I remember with the medicines and everything. What was that like?
It was just, I think it was because, Ken and I think are basically the same kinds of people. I think that it's like we want things to be good with other people. And I think that there was just an innate kindness and decency about him I think that's why so many people loved him and loved his work, because it was almost always instant connection. And when he was younger, when I worked with him at Channel 13, here was this big, tall, gorgeous guy with this mop of blonde hair. And it was like, how could you not want to be his friend? How could you not want to be with somebody who is as kind and decent and loving, if I may say so? Ken and, all of the shooters at 13 welcomed me when I got there in 1988. Every damn one of them came up to me and said, "We're so glad you're here." And, and they all became my best friends. It was like when I had to do stuff like work on the desk or something like that, those guys came over and, gave me story ideas. They said, or if I needed to go to the bathroom, they'd say, I'll listen to the radios. It was always that. And Ken was, right there. He was just a really terrific guy.
And look at me. Make sure you look at me. And when he died, I'm sure he ascended to heaven. There's just not a question in my mind, because I believe. And you think the gates opened for the kindness of that guy? There was a cheering for Ken Day.
I'm sure there was. It was like, come on in, Ken. Don't, forget the paperwork. Just come on in. And who knows? He may be having lunch with Abe Lincoln right now, for all I know. It's like everybody wanted to be with Ken, and to work with him, and to be a part of his life. That was the kind of guy that Ken was.
Heaven's gates opened. Is that correct?
Yep, I think just kind of slide open. Hi, Ken. Come on in.
And would you just let me know what we're saying instead of me saying it? Heaven's gates opened, or could you let me know?
I'm sorry, say again.
Just tell me what it is that opened. That's open and said slide on in. Heaven's gates opened and said slide on in. Tell me that in a sentence. Whatever. You just.
I'm not trying.
So that I get a complete thought out of it, so it stands alone. Heaven's gates open.
Oh, sure. Well, I think that, if you believe in heaven, Ken is there. Let's say that again. If you believe in heaven, Ken's there. I think he showed up, and whoever was there to greet him, St. Peter, whomever, it was like, oh, there's Ken. Come on in.
Beautiful. Perfect. That's very nice. I love it. Good. Thank you for doing this.
Welcome.
And then the service is September 6th.
Okay.
Ask one more, just
Yes.
how tough it was when we found out that Ken had passed away.
Oh.
Something like that.
How tough was it when, I think I may have told you, or you learned from...
You sent me a text that he was coming home the next day, and that things were that he was not doing well. And so I thought, well, boy, that's really tough. I'm really sad to hear that, because I think so many people were pulling for him to do well and to recover. And, when you texted me the next day and said that he had gone, I guess that, the first thing that went through my mind is that, well, he didn't want to put his family through anything more. He knew that it was time to go, and so he went. And I think in one sense made it easier for everybody. That's the kind of person that Ken was. Even in his last moments, I suspect that he made that conscious decision that this would be easier, that, that it was time to leave. I hope that happens for everybody. I sure hope it happens for me.
About Ken Day.
Well, Ken Day, flat out, great guy, great friend, for sure, without a doubt. That's a pause.
Hey, let me ask you, one photographer to another, what'd you think of him?
Honest, compassionate, kind, talented, supportive. He was wonderful. He was a great photographer. Absolutely, without a doubt.
You had mentioned that you knew he was close to God. What's he doing now up there with God?
Well, I believe Ken's playing with, I believe Ken is doing videos with the Angels right now. And I know that one day I'm going to see him again, and we're going to be working together, shooting those videos. And I would say, Ken, I love you, brother, and I'll see you up there for sure.
How is that audio with that? We were okay with that? Yeah. So far, you've been absolutely wonderful. You've been wonderful.
I'm glad. Well, the good thing is I kind of, now that I realize if I pause, you can cut. And I don't want to make a bunch of work for you, but
No, you
but
just
you,
go
you
ahead
can
and talk.
just, yeah.
So
why
far,
there's two
you've been
cameras,
great.
just to be able to-
Everything is
Yeah.
exactly
Well, that, yeah.
what we're looking for. Okay, I'm going to ask you again, if you were just, besides being a great guy, a loving guy, a good photographer, did the guy have a sense of humor at all?
God, he was a bit serious, I'd say. We always were talking about, it just seemed like serious things. Many times, we'd get together on assignments over the years, which I really enjoyed, running into him on a common assignment somewhere all over the California or, mostly. And we would be talking about just life, catching up, or maybe we'd be having, back in town, we'd get together for a lunch, or we'd be on the phone talking, but we were always serious. I never sensed a huge sense of humor, but I'm sure he had one, but it just seemed like we always talked serious.
Well, let me tell you, he was a kook. He could be a kooky guy in a very dopey way.
Yeah, I didn't see
which
that.
tickled me. And does that surprise you that might come out and play once in a while, given the kind of, if you've got an imagination and a vision like Ken did for photography, there's got to be some humor in there too.
Well, I'd imagine there would be. He's got everything else going on, so for sure. He certainly would have a sense of humor. I just guess, we never really went down that path, or I don't remember. I've known the guy probably almost 40 years, so it's like, we didn't really do anything outside except for an occasional lunch or on a phone. And like I said, it was fairly, it was most of our talks were later about his cancer. And that always led to, that was sad, but he was a fighter, and I could tell, that he was doing the best he could, doing everything he could, and I knew that, and it was great. I just wanted to support him and not ask too many questions.
With me telling you that he was a kook and that he did a lot of laughing and had a lot of fun and a very playful sense of humor, very corny. Does that make you happy to hear that?
Well, heck yeah. Of course. The joy, in that part of his life must have been wonderful for his family and his children and friends and at work. That's one of those things that you don't often, see, but you hear. I would have needed to have spent a lot more time around him, which would have been awfully wonderful, but we were all busy, you know how that goes, and so busy, and I was just grateful to run into him when I did on assignments and catch up.
Well, I know that he thought the world of you, and that's a wonderful thing. Is there something you would like to tell me that we've not covered?
Well, I admire greatly his love of God, his family that he loved dearly, his dogs, and just his compassion for life, his work. I know he was very talented. I know he cared deeply about his work, and I will truly miss that man and know that he's in God's arms, and I hope to see him there, and I'm positive I will, because I know he's dancing with God and enjoying his peace right now.
As you said, Mike and Ken were working on 2 music videos of mine that Joyce Mitchell, yourself, produced, and they were both incredibly professional on a level that I'd never experienced. But Ken was absolutely amazing. He had an idea of what he wanted, and even though it made no sense to me, he had me jumping up and down, literally going through hoops to get the shots that he wanted. In one case, along a railroad track, over and over and over again. In another case, in a field somewhere in Northern California with a drone filming from overhead, and simulated rain, and of course, live at a gig after he applied makeup to my grizzled features.
Let me ask you about that. Man to man, what kind of a makeup artist was Ken Day?
He slapped it on.
Tell me what he did. What did he do? Can you walk me through it a little bit? He came out to you in the studio, I believe. That's where we
Yes.
got the photograph.
Yes.
What did he do? He had what in his hands?
He didn't really explain. He just came over and said, "Come here, sit down," and applied makeup so that I would look a certain way in a dark room. I believe, where was the name? It was the,
It was in the black box. At
yeah,
the
black
studio
box.
center.
Yes.
But tell me, he walked up and what did he do? I mean, I'm trying to have you tell me what it was in a complete sentence.
What he did was he perceived that I needed help in terms of the photography, and he applied makeup to my face and arranged my hair to look a little less haphazard. And I just sat there and let him do it. I had no idea as to what I was supposed to look like, but he had an idea of what guitar I should use, the color of the guitar, how I should look. I had some options on guitars and clothing, and he just had an idea, a vision, and he went for it. And it was all in his head. He never verbalized any of it. He just said, "This is the way I see it, let's go." And it was a fantastic experience.
This is kind of a common term we hear about people who are really good. Was he a rock star of a photographer?
Was he part?
A rock star of a photographer.
I've known a few rock stars in my time, and some of the greatest rock stars are very quiet, self-effacing, and go about their job to a high degree of excellence, and that was very similar to Ken. I think Ken was a rock star in terms of photography, film, video. Just fantastic. A privilege to work with somebody like that.
And he was a good makeup artist.
He was a fantastic makeup artist.
Yeah. I mean, 30 years plus that we worked together and traveled all over the country together, and couldn't ask for a more talented guy, a more sincere guy, or a guy with a bigger heart. And Ken was just all of the above. And so, yeah, that was kind of the mix of what went into Ken being so extraordinary, which was technically, he was a wizard with the camera and the lighting and the audio. But beyond that, he was an artist, you know. He could just make things look pretty, but he was just an artist with his camera as a storyteller. And probably the third big thing that went into that mix was his heart. I mean, he just had a huge heart, and that came through in everything that we produced together.
We actually sent him in to shoot brain surgery a couple of times, correct? I mean, he suited up and went in the operating room and shot brain surgery.
Yeah. We worked on, I think, 4 different medical focused programs. And yeah, that's exactly what Ken would do. He'd work with the surgeons and say, where can I be? But I want to be in the middle of it. And he would get all of his scrubs on and his little hat and get in there and be right in the middle of the surgery.
And then there was the time that we went looking for sea lions. What happened with that? I mean, it's like, it was, I mean, I don't know if there's any way of describing what occurred.
And I know you're off camera, so I'm just going to refer to you. But yeah, so there was one particular job that we worked on, and it brought together really kind of all of the things that Ken loved. I mean, it brought together the environment and animals, you know, and the outdoors. And so it was an environmental program, and we were heading up and down the Southern California coast, shooting all the things that Ken could make so pretty, surfing and beaches and beautiful landscapes. But one thing that was in the script was sea lions. We needed to get sea lions. I mean, this was part of the script. And we searched and searched and searched all up and down the coast and could not find them. So our search finally ended up in Newport Beach Harbor. And I said, we're renting a boat. And Ken was like, what? And he said, who's going to pilot this thing? And I said, I am. And so Joyce and Ken and I jumped in this boat with all of Ken's gear. We figured, you know, given our luck, we weren't going to find any sea lions, but we figured it's either going to be a fun afternoon out on the harbor or we'll see. And we kind of settled in, had a fun time, and all of a sudden, off the starboard side of the boat, here were the sea lions. And Ken went from leisurely to work mode in like a flash. And Ken got the shots. They were the prettiest shots in the world. And he started barking orders at me. He was like, slow down, slow it down, back it up. Okay, engine off. You know, it's he was kind of directing me at that point. But yeah, you know, Joyce ended up dubbing the boat the SS Minnow, and Ken was Gilligan, and I was the skipper. And so every time after that, every time Ken and I would see each other, the first thing he'd say to me is, "Hey, skipper." So it was a fun trip. Did that do it?
Yeah, that was great. That was great. I'm going to say something. We don't even tell each other we love each other. We didn't tell Ken that. I never told him that. Did you love Ken?
Oh. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned earlier that Ken had the biggest heart in the world. And his heart, for me, is what made everything beautiful. And it's the reason I wanted to work with him. I wanted to work with him over and over. We were working on all cause-related topics. And nobody could capture it like Ken. And I loved his work, and I loved the man. He was just beautiful in every way.
Okay, we're on.
So you're going to give your name?
Joyce Mitchell, JoyceMitchell.
So Ken Day, your relationship, the bond you had all those years, and the communication between you two. Tell me about that.
Ken Day and I talked all the time. We worked together. We knew each other really, really well on a work level. All the years, I just thought, Ken's there. I never thought about telling him I loved him. Toward the end of his life, I had that opportunity when he was in Stanford to say, Ken, I love you. And he uttered the words back to me. It was muttering, but he got them out that he loved me too. And it's just a reminder that this world is all about love. Love and God, that's all that we've got.
And when you went out on shoots with Ken, Ken was always looking out for everyone else.
Ken always had my back. He always took care of me. Even on shooting a couple of years ago when he was, still getting chemo, and we'd work around his chemo days on setting up shoots because I had hip injuries, hip replacements. Ken would bring me a chair, and I wasn't forced to carry gear. I was kind of treated like the queen bee by Ken because that's who Ken was. He wanted us to do well for the total outcome of the project. He wanted it to look good. He wanted it to be special, spectacular. He wanted it well lit. I had patience with him because I knew the final product was worth waiting for.
And over the years, we all saw how pretty his pictures were and his storytelling, but his professional peers, they really showed with their appreciation of what he did, the awards that he won. He was someone that really deserved all of the praise that he got.
Ken was one of the best. Now, did Ken enter Emmys? No. I was the one who marched him forward. Finally, I think I got him to enter an Emmy, but I would even do the entering for him. The last one I did the entering because he didn't want the praise. He didn't care about the recognition. He wanted to do the job. And he wanted to do it well. And in the course of the years of working with him that I know together, he and I received multiple Emmys, and it was an honor to be able to plunk it down on the table in front of him at lunch, because the last thing he's going to do is go to an Emmy ceremony. It's just not who he was. He was the quiet guy in the back of the room that today everyone is talking about.
So, hundreds, thousands of hours, thousands of programs. You must have a favorite story of working with Ken.
Well, all the drives back and forth to LA because he did not want to fly. He might have left something out of his van that he needed. So we would drive back and forth, back and forth. There are only so many things you can talk about driving back and forth to LA with someone about, or San Diego. So, there was one time it's like I'm looking around and I'm thinking, what do I say, Ken, do you think plants have feelings? He goes, that's a good conversation, Joyce. Of course they have feelings. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we have hit an all-time low until we went on the bathroom tour of I-5. We went to the funkiest bathrooms. He took me to the funkiest bathrooms. He goes, God, I wish I would have taken pictures of all of them. We have done, this is out of boredom, and eating M&Ms, because that's the other thing he didn't do was eat on the road. Eating was a luxury for Ken Day because he just worked, and they were 10-hour days. So we'd get M&Ms and talk and really got to know each other. And the guy had my back, and I always had his back. Whenever I was on a shoot, I was watching out for him too, always. had the good fortune of working 25, 30 years with him, doing I don't know how many numbers of documentaries. It's pretty special. I miss him a lot. Did I not talk in sound bites?
You're all good. You're all good. It's all gonna get cut up and we can make it work. It's all good.
You want more?
Let me tell you that I wake up in the morning and I can't believe he's gone. And I've been grieving for months over this, and yet I can't imagine how his family must feel. He impacted people with his kindness and with his heart. And the day before he died, he wanted to come back as a hummingbird. You know, he said that he loved birds, he loved nature, he loved outdoors. Whenever I see a hummingbird, I actually have a conversation with Kende, and I don't think I'm making it up. I really, really feel it, and I really, really believe it. Kende is close. He is nearby. He's watching all of us right now. I love that Kenny Day. Forever and ever and ever.
You painted a picture of a hummingbird. Talk about the picture just for a moment.
Boy, that I painted a hummingbird, and that hummingbird came right out of Kende. Kende was on my shoulder when I painted that hummingbird. I don't know where it came from, but it just spilled out. And I never painted anything in that style, in that direction, but Kende was right here, and he was helping me do it. When he was first diagnosed, I painted his dog. He loved his dog, Gus, just adored Gus. I did the same thing. I painted all night, and I painted Gus. And Gus traveled with him to the rooms when he was quarantined in Sacramento, and I think Gus went to Stanford, and he loved that dog, and I didn't know what else I could give back. I wanted to heal him so badly that I thought painting is all I could give and do, and I painted Gus and I painted a hummingbird at his guidance and direction.
One more thing that I want you to talk about. You sent me a picture that Vicky, I guess, had sent you, where I think it was Gus just brought the picture in.
Oh.
Go ahead and tell Ted that story.
Vicky and I were talking about different stages of life, and death. When people ascend, if they go away, do they come back? And she said that I think she was lying in bed, and the dog, she had a dream about Ken, and then their dog came rustling in and had a photograph in its mouth, and it was a picture of Kende, and didn't know where it came from, what it was, and it gives me goosebumps, which I know it's God's truth, that he's watching us, he's with us, he's not gone. He's not mortal, but heaven is cheering. Heaven is just cheering that God has got this angel that is making it more beautiful up there than ever. More beautiful than ever. I miss him. It's like it can't be real, you know? It's like these things can't be real, but it is. And so we learn to live, and we learn, life is for the living, and we go on. And we honor and we cherish those who go before us. Lost a good one. The best. Great friend, like a brother.
I'm Jim Hill. I was a news reporter at KOVR TV in the 1980s, and I worked with Ken many times. No better photographer to work with. His skills, perfect. And what a nice guy. You know, when Ken became ill, we often talked about what we do when he was healthy. And he wanted to go to the Eastern Sierra and photograph the night sky, in particular the Milky Way. Well, we never got that chance. But I know Ken's spirit is out there. And I know that spirit is probably getting some of the best pictures of the Milky Way you could ever imagine. I'm going to miss him.
Jim and I were both friends with Ken Day, and Ken would call us once in a while and want to talk. And he talked to me, and then he talked to Jim. Why would he want to talk to Jim? He's my friend. But that was kind of how Ken Day was. He made you feel like you were his most special friend. Hi, I'm Gaye Hill, and my husband Jim Hill and I both worked with Ken. And over the years, Ken would visit us here in Los Angeles quite often. And during the pandemic, he did something odd. He said, "I'll come and visit, but can I pee in your backyard?" That was the kind of person Ken was, that he didn't want to spread the virus and he wanted to protect us. So much so that he used the facilities in the back. I have to say, that fig tree has never done better. Thank you, Ken.
Hi, I'm Tim Sinwell. I worked with Ken Day for 10 years at 13. Most of us think of him as a mild-mannered, easygoing, soft-spoken, never cursing or losing his cool, but it happened once. And if there's any children in the room, have them cover their ears, because I saw Ken go like this. Gosh darn it!